Okay, so these two FRQs, I know that when you got them cold. We haven't done any yet. Don't really understand the grading, but this is really actually a good way to go through it and look at it, because I think in the end you should realize that even if you couldn't have gotten all of the points for each one, that you probably could have gotten at least one, maybe more points than you did. And so each free response question on a math AP exam is worth how many points? Who can tell me? What? 9. They are worth 9 points. So there's a total of 9 points for each question. And the points are not determined, like what's going to get what point, until after everybody's taken it. So it's not like it's written with the expectation that A will have 2 points and B will have 2 or whatever. It's written, everybody takes it, then they figure out where the points go before they start grading it. It's also not graded in the same manner that like a classroom test would be, which means if you go through and grade a classroom test, most of the time you're marking which ones are wrong. When you go through and grade an AP exam, you're going through and you're putting a 1 next to where you're getting those up to 9 points. Okay, so the little lines that you have should be more vertical than like angular, so that that's the 1, and the top is the total number of points that you got. Okay, on an AP exam, the chances of you getting all 9 points on all of the free response questions kind of slim to none. That's just because that's how it's written. Up through there, when they're written, rewritten so that you could do them at the pre-AP level, most of the time, yeah, you are totally capable of getting all 9 points. It may be tough because the question may be a tough question, but it's at least possible that everybody is capable of it. The first question I don't love. Both of these are questions that were supposed to be on your CBAs that we didn't take, and I don't love the first question. It's not a great representation of what it would look like because it's way too short. There's not enough parts, but it is what it is, and it's still something that we can learn from. So let's look at that one. It says distance on a coordinate plane and beyond. So Houston is the approximate midpoint between Corpus Christi and Shreveport, Louisiana. The distance from Houston to Corpus is approximately 220 miles. The coordinates for Corpus Christi are -4010, and the coordinates for Houston are 92186. And you can write on this. I have to have these back. You can't take them with you, but you can write all over it, whatever. I did not grade these. I had Shelby in the back, my lovely assistant back there, getting her makeup time, graded these for me. So there are some things that are kind of a judgment call, which is something that we talked about while she wants to be a math teacher. So I said, get on it. You got to learn how to grade. But if there's something that you feel like maybe, even if I had graded them, if you feel like you should have gotten a point and you didn't, or you probably didn't, I'm going to come around and take it away from you. And even if I did, what does it mean? Nothing, because they're not going in the grade book, right? But you need to know whether or not that would legit be a point. Okay, so please ask questions as we go through this. So part of the instructions that I had, I didn't waste paper by printing them, but I put them on the board, said that all work should be shown in the given section or something like that. I don't remember what the words were. But basically what that's saying is that here, when we have this picture, any work and anything you do up here means absolutely nothing. All work that's going to be looked at and that you could possibly get credit for Part A has to be done under Part A. All right, now you didn't get dinged for that on here, and you still are encouraged, obviously, to label things on your picture. You may need to or kind of be required to, and do whatever you need to do up here, but just make sure that you translate all of that down to the work that you would be doing in A. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So then on A it says, what are the coordinates for Shreveport? Show all calculations that lead to your answers. Okay. Now, in order to get the calculation points for this, there are different ways to work things. Your work doesn't always have to look exactly like what the answer key would look like, or it doesn't have to be exactly what I personally would have done. However, just like it is explained in that showing work thing I had you glue in the front of your ISN, it must be a logical mathematical process that anyone can follow. So your reasoning that, if I said, how did you find that? You're like, well, I multiplied this by 2, then I subtracted 37, and then I took this one and I put it over here, and then we multiplied, and, and everybody else is going, what? And then in the end you got the right answer, right? So it made sense to you. the work would have just looked like scratch work all over the point. Nobody's giving you credit for that work at all. Those reasoning skills are good. It's good that you have them. They can save you sometimes, but this is why I have been pushing and saying over and over and over again, you have to learn to think algebraically, because if you can't, you're not getting these points. End of story. So all those things that I know a lot of you don't like that I tell you have to do, it's not me. It's not my opinion. It's that if I don't make you do that, you can't do this. So it's because I know what you have to be required to do. So the A part, and one of the reasons why this isn't necessarily a great representation, is that it had 5 points. There's usually not that many points on one section, but it wasn't a long enough question, so we were kind of, just grasping at something to give you points for. But here's how these worked. Now there was 1 point given for the correct setup to solve for x. And again, the correct setup doesn't necessarily have to look identical to mine, but if it is some algebraic, logical from the information you have set up, you're good. 1 for the logical setup of y. Then the next 2 points are for the correct x and y answers. So that's 4 points right there. If you did do your backwards crazy reasoning where everything was just all over the place, or you did a bunch of stuff on your picture and you were able to come up with these answers, then you would have gotten these 2 points, but not these 2 points. Does that make sense? So you still get 2 of the 4, which is not bad, right? I mean, it's better than nothing, but that's where those 4 points came from. The 5th point in A is just for your answer being in an ordered pair. This sentence says, what are the coordinates for Shreveport? Which tells you right there that your answer has to be an ordered pair. So they're giving you a point for just even understanding what the question is asking. So if you're working on this and either you're completely lost or you think you know what you're doing, but your answers are weird and you just feel like there's just something that's just not right, then you, at least in the end, whatever craziness you have, if you put that in an ordered pair, you could get 1 point for that. Okay, because that's showing that you understand that. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen every single time because you don't know, and it varies from question to question, but you at least try and get it in the format that you need in the end. Okay, are we good? Any questions on the A part? All right, good. What was the answer? This right here? 224, 362. It's a midpoint situation. All right, so B says there is a satellite positioned directly over the city of Houston, 20,000 miles in the atmosphere. Using the distance described in part A above, calculate the approximate distance from the satellite to Corpus Christi to the nearest mile. Show all calculations that lead to your answer. All right, so is this answer going to be in an ordered pair? No, it is not. So you draw out whatever it says. Draw a picture. It can be very, very helpful to you. So here's my picture. And here's Houston, here's Corpus. I know they're 220 miles apart. The satellite is up here in the sky, and it's 20,000 miles above the city of Houston. So when I get that in here, now I've got a right triangle, okay? And I'm looking for the approximate distance from the satellite to Corpus, which the only thing that would make sense would be the hypotenuse. So I have a missing side of a right triangle. What am I going to do to figure that out? Pythagorean theorem, okay? There's another option we'll talk about once we're done with this, but it's Pythagorean theorem, which is 7th grade math. So here where 2 of your points came from, which is ridiculous for a question like this, but you get 1 point for using the Pythagorean theorem. You get another point for substituting it into the Pythagorean theorem correctly. It's just screaming 7th grade math all the way around, okay? That's 2 points there that none of y'all should have missed. So then you have to work this out, and then the last 2 points come from the answer and the units. So let's talk about this. I did give you credit if you put the decimal. I kind of wish I hadn't now since the grade didn't really matter, but it says to the nearest mile. Okay, and again, part of the thing with the directions, it said all of your answers should be to the nearest thousandth. That is, unless you are told otherwise. And whatever it says in the question takes precedence over that generic directions. Those directions are for, like, if it doesn't tell you what to do, it should be to 3 decimal places. Okay, so really this is the only acceptable number that would be given any credit, although you did get credit for this. I graded 3rd period's set of this, and there were some people that took the square root here and then simplified this, And if they, which was still really, really ugly, but if they simplified it correctly, I gave them credit for it. But first of all, nobody's ever going to want you to simplify something that looks like that. And second of all, that really technically isn't right because that's still not to the nearest mile, right? You would have to use the calculator for that. But if it didn't say to the nearest mile, then this would not be the right answer. This would be acceptable. And the other thing that you could do is just take the square root of this and leave it, because something else that's in the directions says that your answers do not have to be reduced all the way. So it could just be the square root of this big yucky number and you leave it. If you try and simplify it and you mess it up, you're not getting credit. If you stop, you're done. So then the question and the argument always becomes, okay, then why do we have to simplify everything in the class all the time? Because you're going to be expected in your class and even on most of these problems up all the way through and including in calculus to still simplify all the way, even though, or at least part of the way, even though on the AP exam you don't have to, because if you don't ever do that, you're not going to be able to work through half of what you do, because then things are cancel out and things aren't going to work out. Like, you still have to have that skill. If you never simplify anything, all of your answers would be crazy, insane, horrible. And that's not the purpose of that. The purpose of that on the AP exam is that if you get to here and you're supposed to, and you get the square root of this number, well, they're testing, can you get to this number and do you understand what you're doing? Not, hey, can you simplify that square root? So it's all about what are we really trying to see if you can do. Okay. Then the last point is for the miles. And it says to the nearest mile. If you got some work on here, and again, you know it's totally wrong, because let's say you get like 15,000. So you know it has to be wrong because it's not greater than 20,000, but you really don't know what else to do and how else to get it. Just go, all right, whatever. Maybe you could get credit for this. You get these two, you won't get this one. But if you put 15,000 miles, you will get credit for those units. Right? Units are a point a lot of times, not always, and you won't always have a question where you get credit for the units and just putting in an ordered pair like in the same question. It maybe would be max like 1 point on a question, but hey, it's something, right? It's something's better than nothing. Earlier today, you could not see the little dot on my eye, so somebody said, well, what if I didn't use ML? I said, well, that's good, because that's not what this is. But if you use ML, what does ML stand for? Milliliters, and you'll be wrong. Even if in your brain it means miles. If you just use M for miles, you're wrong, because what does M mean? Meters. If you're unsure about how to abbreviate it on a test like this, write out the word. Yeah. Now in Schoology, it's going to count it wrong, because you really do have to know your abbreviations, and you should. But if you're stressing out over that, like, oh, I think I'm going to do this wrong, I can't remember anything. Just write out the word, and it's absolutely fine. Okay. Any questions on this? Now, even if you could not have worked any more of the problem than you worked originally, do you think you really could have gotten more points than you got? Yes. For some of you, yes. For some of you, maybe not, depending on what all you put. But that's what you need to understand from this, is that you are capable of getting some more of these points. And you have to change your mindset on things. Instead of looking at it and being like, oh, I only got 6 points, you need to think, woohoo, I got 6 points, right? Because that's really good on one of these questions, okay? Except this one. This one was way too easy. All right, now this next one. A line is passing through points E and F. Can you even see line EF on here? No. Well, not on mine, but even on yours. You have line EF on there? No, you don't. You have line segment EF. But line EF does exist, right? Even though it's not on there. So this says, what is the slope of line EF? Even though what you're looking at is line segment EF. It's not that that's wrong or bad. It's fine. It's the same thing either way. So for A, when you're taking this, you don't know how many points it's worth. The people that wrote it don't even know how many points it's worth before it gets graded. This could potentially be 2 points. It could be your process and your actual slope. Can you accurately count the slope from the graph? Yes, you can. You can just count it off the graph and be accurate. But if that's all you do, and there does end up being a point for the process, you would only get one of the 2 points. Does that make sense to you? So if it was graded that way, how many of you would have missed the process point? Okay, good. There's been very few all day long, which is good, which means that at least some of you are listening to me and understand when I say you have to show your work even when it's easy. Yes, ma'am?
So if you just use the graph and you do rise over run for that, can you write rise over run equals and then put it? Would that count for work?
Probably not, because that's not showing where you actually got the two numbers from. Most likely for something this simple, it probably wouldn't be a point anyway, but sometimes there's other things which seem so simple because you can just know it, but really writing something, even if you didn't show all the work, but you just did even delta y over delta x and then put the numbers in or something, just wrote the numbers down, that's something that you would get credit for that. Yes, ma'am.
What if you did the work, but it was wrong?
Okay. Okay, so if you use the right process, but your answer is wrong. So let's look at what the answer is, and I'll answer that as we do this. This is the correct answer, and so point E was at -2, 9. Where is point F? 3, 5? Oh, dang it, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Can't even read. That's point F. Okay, I'm sorry. Point E is where? 3, 5. Okay. It wasn't a trick question. I just did with the wrong ones. So if you were using these, and so you did 5 minus 9 over 3 minus a -2. If you wrote that down like this, oh, sorry, you can see it. If you wrote that down, and then you did the numbers wrong, if it was worth 2 points, then you would get this point, but you wouldn't get the one for the slope itself. Does that make sense? Okay. Now there wasn't a process point here, it was just a point for the slope. So whether you did this or not, it didn't matter. But again, you don't always know that. Sometimes you get lucky if you didn't show your work. But this is the slope you should get. Now if you don't get the right answer for A, do you have any hope of getting the answer for B right? Nope. And you also don't get D or E either, because you've got to use that and what you get through all of it, right? I know, just hang on, hang on. Just shh, hang on, I'm not finished with my explanation. However, the way the math AP exam is written, they're not like, if you can't find the slope correctly, you can't get any of the rest of it. That doesn't mean you can't do anything else. They're trying to test your process in this. So if you get this wrong, what did you get, Belen? It's okay, just tell me. 6 over -7. Okay, so she got 6 over -7. So she didn't get this point. What did you get for B?
7 over 6.
Do you get credit for that?
Yes, I got 2 points.
Yes. Okay. All right. Because she got credit for that. Her answer does not match the answer key, and it doesn't match most of the rest of yours. But she took her wrong answer, used it correctly to get the perpendicular slope here, and she got the credit for it. So that's called reading with your answer. So when I grade them so that you know, like, that's not really the right number, like her number does not match the answer key, but she got credit, usually it'll have like an RW next to it, which means read with. So on the AP exam, if you do that, and a lot of times you have to use part A into part B, and then you use part B for C, and they're all connected, you mess up one time, the rest is not going to match the answer key. That makes grading these things a nightmare, because then they have to rework the whole problem with your wrong answer. Does that make sense to you? Which is not something that I asked Shelby to do. I asked her to look at this and maybe one other part, but not necessarily some of the rest of it. So it may be that you actually got more points than what you have on there too, and you can figure that out as we go through this. Okay. So no matter what this was, if it was wrong, you use your wrong answer correctly. Because again, we're not testing. If I counted hers wrong here, then I'm still testing this part. If I count it right here, then she's showing me that she does understand how the slopes of perpendicular lines are related to each other. Okay? So again, if this was something that was super complicated and you couldn't even figure out what to do, or maybe you're doing it and you just know that it's not right, don't give up. Get to something, even be like, I'm probably not getting that point, but then use that here, and if you're using it correctly moving forward, you could possibly get all the rest of the points. And that sounds all great, so it's like, okay, I could just make something up at the beginning. Well, no, it can't just be totally made up. Plus, most of the time, if your answer isn't correct and you keep using it in something else, it's not going to work out real pretty, which means you might end up with some horrendous things that make it very difficult for you to complete your process. But again, you just keep trying, and you just because we're testing, do you understand what to do, not specifically your numbers and adding and subtracting and stuff, okay? We good on that? Now, the second point on B was for your explanation. A whole lot of you did not get that point because I told her don't take anything that has the word opposite in it, because when we started the slope, I told you that ain't opposite nothing, because opposite is opposite of what? That doesn't even make any sense. So it's not an opposite reciprocal. They're not just opposites. You can say negative reciprocal. Some people wrote it out in a sentence. You take the reciprocal and change the sign. Their product is a -1. Any of those things are fine, but nothing with the word opposite. Okay, so lots of different ways to explain it that were right, but a lot of them were wrong. Okay. Any questions about those? Okay. So the next part here is where, and yours in particular, Belen, you may have actually deserved a point there depending on how you did it and what your answer is. So this says, will line EF pass through point 12, -3 and justify your answer? All right, so first of all, and this has happened on homeworks that weren't these types of questions. Make sure you're answering the question that's being asked. Because you could have some beautiful work, a beautiful justification, but if you never really say yes or no, you're missing a point. This is a yes or no question. So make sure you have yes or no. And you know what? If you don't have a clue what to do with the rest of it, you got a 50-50 shot. Pick one and stop leaving stuff blank. Yeah, good job, Abel. All right. I mean, hey, take a shot at it because it's something, right? It's not like whether it's blank or he had it wrong, it still doesn't get credit. But if he's got it right, he's got his point, right? You don't always get that lucky either, but sometimes you do, just like on a multiple choice question. Sometimes you're eliminating answers that are clearly wrong and you've eliminated all but one, so you don't even have to do the work or know how to do it. Bam, that's your answer. I mean, things work out that way sometimes. Okay, so there's a few different ways to figure this out. What is one way to figure this out? Who wants to tell me?
You can substitute the y and the x of the new point with one of the previous ones and see if you get the slope.
Okay, so basically I already have the slope of EF, right? If I use this point and one of these 2 points and calculate the slope and see if it's the same slope. Does everybody agree with that? Could I write the equation of the line? Yeah, I have a slope, I have this slope, and I have this point, or I have this slope and this point here, and then I can write the equation of the line and substitute that in and see if I get a true statement. That works, right? You got to be real careful with this whole I'm going to continue the line thing, because guessing off the graph is not a great accurate way for it always to work out for you. So the answer is no. Belen, what did you have, yes or no?
I left it blank, but I was going to say yes because I forgot how to do it and I was trying to.
Okay. So here's the thing is that look at what I got when I did that slope. I got -6/7. And it, depending on which point you use. I used 12, -3 and point F. If you use 12, -3 and E, you would have gotten a different slope probably too. But what I found here was that no, this doesn't have this same slope. Just by coincidence, or by probably her writing down using the wrong number somewhere, this number matches the slope Belen had. So if I had actually had that in A, what would my answer here be? Yes. And then my justification would have to match that. But I could still get these 2 points if the answer is yes, because it does match my A. If I put yes with the right A in this, then no, I'm not getting credit for that yes. Does that make sense to you? Because it's all about how are you comparing these 2 answers. And if my answer here is -6/7 and I get -6/7 here, they have the same slope, which means they're on the same line. Does that make sense to you? Okay, now that's not what the answer key says, and that's not what most everybody else had, because, you know, and if I had that -6/7 and I got 12, -3 and I used point E, I wouldn't have gotten that as my slope, and then I would have, you know, things just wouldn't have worked out too well. But let's say A, I had 2/3. I didn't get credit for that. I get this on C, and then my answer is still no, because the slopes, they don't have the same slope. I'm still getting credit for all that because I'm still comparing it correctly and understanding what my answers mean. It's all about, do you understand what this stuff even means? Not can you just do it and get me an answer, which is what most of y'all are really good at. That's why a lot of you were really good in algebra, and now that people are asking you, how do you know and what does it mean? You're like, I don't know, I was just doing stuff people told me to do. Well, that doesn't mean you understand math at all. That means you can follow you can follow an algorithm and get an answer, but that isn't going to work too well for you from here on out. So my answer then here, your explanation can vary depending on how you came up with it. But when I did this and I got that it was different, my answer is no. That's 1 point for that. then the slope between negative 2, 9 and 12, negative 3 is negative 6/7 and not negative 4/5. That's my explanation. But if, Natasha, I'm getting the feeling that you used 12, negative 3 in E.
Yes.
Okay, so what did you get for your slope?
I got negative 8, 9.
Okay, so she got negative 8/9 because she used a different point. So it makes sense that that didn't even match. So hers would just say negative 8/9 here or something like that. And that's fine because it's just a different point that she used. Okay, any questions on C? But here's the thing. On here, your justification, if you have to have evidence. You can't just have it. You just can't just have words. So if I say the slope between these 2 points isn't the same or isn't negative 4/5, so say I said that the slope between this and this isn't negative 4/5, but I don't have any work over here, I'm not getting credit for this. Because how do you know it's not negative 4/5? Right? You have to have something to back up what you're saying. Okay? Any questions on C? Alrighty. So D says to write the equation of the line perpendicular to line EF that will pass through point F. So here's another one where Belinda's answer probably, or her answer wouldn't match the answer key because her perpendicular slope is 7/6 and not 5/4. But if she uses that perpendicular slope in here correctly, she's going to get credit for this even though her answer might look different than somebody else's. So I know my perpendicular slope already. I found it. I know a point. It's got to go through F. And so these are, if I plug it into here, this gives me it in point slope form and I can stop. That's the smartest, best way to do it. Okay? If you are a glutton for punishment, you can put it into slope intercept form. Why in the world you would want to continue, I don't know. But if you do continue and you mess up, you are wrong. So remember, you want to stop. Because we're not testing, can you distribute this fraction and then add 9? But that's basically what your answer is based on if you keep going and you mess up. So just stop. It doesn't say what form. Make it easiest. This just, you shouldn't even be going there. And I think we learned that a while back, right? I told you you'd learn to love this. Was I right? Yes. Okay. And I knew you would all start to learn that I really do know what I'm talking about. Then I have to answer the second part, where will the new line intersect the y-axis? So I got a couple of options. I can continue and do all this mess. I'd rather not, but I could get here and reduce this. But then this right here, if it's going to intersect the y-axis, that means the x value is 0. So if I substitute 0 in for x, solve for my y, that's what y is when x equals 0. Your answer really should be an ordered pair. Your y-intercept is an ordered pair, this ordered pair right here. But I think you did get credit for just these on this. Now, so earlier today I had somebody say, okay, well, I have on here that it will intersect at 46/4. And somebody popped off and said, well, it's because you didn't reduce. He said, well, I didn't have to reduce. He was right. That really wasn't why that isn't a correct answer. It's more that I don't know what it is. It will intersect. I don't know what it is. And it will intersect at 46/4. Well, what the heck is 46/4? Yeah, is that an X? Is that a Y? Is that a Z? What are you even talking about? And that's I know that the person that said it, he knew exactly what he meant. You know, y'all say that all the time. Well, you know what I meant. Yeah, I do know what you meant, but that is totally not what you said. And so, as somebody that's reading that answer, I don't know if you understand what that number is, or if you were able to just find it because you remember doing a problem like that, so you can do the math and get a number, but you have no clue what that number means. And that happens to y'all all too often. You have to understand what that value means and then be able to communicate it, okay? Any questions on D? All right. On E, if point D is graphed at 0, 0, where in the second quadrant would point C be graphed to ensure that quadrilateral CDEF is a parallelogram? Explain why CDEF is a parallelogram. All right, so a lot of you that got this far got credit for the ordered pair, but your point was just, or your explanation was just a hot mess. Okay, so the point, which you can find by counting where it should be, is -5/4. The explanation, I mean, I know some people it was blank for half of this anyway, but if you did get this far, I don't know that anybody got credit for the explanation, to be honest with you, because she did. Okay, good. A lot of you were on the right track, but you didn't have enough evidence there. there are a few different ways how you could show that it's a parallelogram. There's really only one that you actually know at this point. We haven't talked about quadrilaterals yet, and it's not anything that you talk about in junior high. Up till now, really the only way you know a parallelogram is a parallelogram is if a pair of opposite sides are parallel. Okay? Should know. You can also tell the quadrilateral is a parallelogram because both pair of opposite sides are congruent. But if you were going to say that, first of all, that's a wild guess because nobody's ever told you that before. And second of all, you would have had to do the distance formula 4 times, and I highly doubt any of you actually did that. Okay? So you would, in order to say that they are congruent, you have, how do you know? You'd have to show and say, oh, look, here they are. Here are the measurements. That's why I know that they're congruent. If I'm going to say that it is a parallelogram because the opposite sides are parallel, if this is all that I show, which that's the slope that I had in A, and then it's basically the slope I use to figure out where C is supposed to be, that's only showing that one pair of opposite sides is parallel. And what's a quadrilateral where exactly one pair of opposite sides is parallel? Trapezoid. Good. So if this is all I know, it doesn't guarantee me that it's a trapezoid, but it could be a trapezoid or it could be a parallelogram. But without more evidence, I don't know. So if I'm going to say that the opposite sides are parallel, I know that because, well, these two have the same slope, and then these two here also have this slope here. So you have to have the evidence of some sort to back up what you are saying. Okay? And again, it doesn't have to say and look exactly like mine, but it does have to be something that is, you know, legal and would make sense together. Any questions about that? All right. Now on this one, could you have gotten more points than you did, even based on how much, you know, if you could only have worked just as much as you did before, probably at least 1 point. And, you know, if you hadn't overthought stuff, maybe you could have actually worked through some more things as well. Because you are capable. If you weren't capable of the material, I wouldn't have given to you. What I knew that you didn't have any knowledge of yet was the grading part of it and that sort of stuff. But the material, yes, you are totally capable of. Your final exam has a free response question on it. I am not going to count it against you because we haven't really done any. There's not a whole lot of really great ones out there that I have found or even tried to write based on the content that we've had up to this point. Next semester, there's a lot more possibilities for that. So it would have been hard for us to do a whole lot of these anyway. But it's kind of good that we just went over these since you have a final exam next week. But there, you can get a total of how many points on each question? 9. All right, so I'm going to count it as a bonus, which means that your you can get 109 on your final exam. That's the only place the bonus is coming from. It's not coming from another random question like I do sometimes. So you absolutely want to be able to scrape and fight for every single point you possibly can on this. Okay, does that make sense to you? And not give up and stop. Just keep plugging through. The bad thing about these is that sometimes if you can't get through C, sometimes you can't do D. But that doesn't mean don't even read it, because maybe you can't do D, but maybe you could come up with something for E. Or heck, maybe just reading them will make C make more sense, and then you could go back and get it done. Okay? Do you have a question? I thought you were going to say something.
I did, but I don't remember now.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions, comments? I've had some confessions today. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it's not like for each letter, there's not 9 points for each.
Oh, no. It's 9 points total for the page.
One FRQ for the exam is going to be
Yes.
part A.
Yes, so one FRQ would look like this. And then, so it's, I don't know how many parts it is, I don't remember. And it's actually, it is a good question. It's a decent question. Like, I don't think A is a great question. B, I'm sorry, I mean the first one. I don't think the first one's a great question. This one's really not too bad. This is a good question. The third one is a good question. So it's going to be, you know, longer than the first one, like this one is. But no, it's 9 points total. Like there was 1 point for this piece, 2 here, 2 here, 1 or 2 here, and 2 here. And so they're usually spread out kind of like that instead of all crammed together like on the first one. But it doesn't guarantee that it's like 2, 2, and 2. I mean, you really have no idea when you do it. Okay? Good question. Did you have something else?
I was going to say that, so basically to get, even though we don't know what their grades and if they give us 1 point, we should try to like explain our answers.
Absolutely. Explain what, because if you, depending on what they're actually looking for, and of course what the question is based on or whatever else, if your explanation includes something that shows you have an understanding of what's going on, you might get a point. You might not, but you don't know. And the other thing you can do is sit there and stare at the wall until you're done anyway, so you might as well give them something. Oh, and somebody, I don't remember which class it was, but had, and I think it was on the green one, completely erased what they had. And we could see that the right answer was there, but it was completely erased, and you didn't get credit for it. I don't know if it was in this class or not. But, so don't do that. That's why I say I'm going to come around and steal your erasers. So don't do that. If you're not going to be able to replace it with something, leave it, even if you know it's wrong, because maybe you're wrong about it being wrong. That ever happened to you? Yes?
Wait, so when you take an AP math test, they don't make you write PID like they do for every other AP test?
No.
For bio, I know they make us do something
No.
like that.
No, it's in pencil, and even though it's in pencil, you don't have to erase. So let's say that I did this and I was like, oh dang, that's wrong. Okay, well first of all, erasing takes time. It can erase a hole in your paper. I could just X through it and say, all right, don't look at that, and then I'm going to redo it. And you'll have a little bit more room than I gave you here because I was trying to save some paper. I still felt like I gave you enough room, but you usually have enough room on the real ones to be able to mark something out and redo it without having to worry about erasing a hole in your paper. It's a good question. Anything else? Those are good questions. Huh? The tree saver, yeah. All right.